Okay, so we are on webinar number 3, which this week is all about sleep. Let's just do a quick recap from last week and then we'll get into this week's topic. So from last week, we talked about cognitive distortions, and if you remember, or if you haven't watched the video, just check out the video on the YouTube page. Talked about 3 particular types of cognitive distortions that are probably a bit more common or prevalent during the COVID-19 pandemic. Catastrophizing, so really taking things and blowing them out of proportion. Mental filtering, so filtering out the good stuff and only focusing on the bad stuff. Reasoning is reasoning with emotion versus logic, so letting fear or our emotions, allowing that to take over our reasoning part of our brain instead of the logical part, which is much more fact-based. So for this week, when we're talking about sleep, what I want you to think is, the metaphor I'm going to build is, think of our brains as the battery, and sleep is our chargers. Every night we put our brains or our batteries on charge. If we get enough sleep, as you can see from this slide here, if we can stay in that light green to green area, we're getting enough sleep, the battery's getting charged, we can go about our day-to-day things feeling better mentally, physically, and so on. The issues when we get into that dark yellow, yellow-brown, or to the red zone, when we are not recharging our battery, we're not getting enough sleep, that's when things can go downhill really fast. Sleep really is that great equalizer that helps balance things out. It's when we get recharged, it's when our body recovers from the day-to-day stress, physically or mentally. We're use that metaphor, recharging our brain. Our brain is the battery, sleep is the charger that we plug in each night. So we think if we're plugging in our phones at night to charge them up for the morning, we're going to bed to charge up our brains. So when we're looking at sleep, and we're going to walk through some tips and some really simple things. As you know, my theme is do the simple things extraordinarily well, and you'll get profound results. First step is getting your sleep number. So no, this is not an advertisement for one of those fancy $5,000 beds where they talk about your sleep number. It's a little bit different. Your sleep number is how many hours of sleep do you need on a regular basis that helps you, that recharges your battery. What do you need? What's that magic number that gets you enough rest that you feel good, right? If you get that magic number, so say it's 7 hours, if you get that on a regular basis, you're feeling good, you're feeling rested, you're waking up rested. So what is your sleep number? That's important. That's the first part. And once we have that number, then we're going to look at what your weekly sleep quota is, and we'll do some very basic math to figure out what do you need on a weekly basis. And that's what we'll look at right here. 8 hours a night times 7 days a week, 56 hours. That's my goal number. And if I look at the week, if I step back a little bit more and I look at the week and say, okay, 56 hours is my goal. If I can get close to that, I'm going to be recharging my battery. If I'm only getting 40 hours a week and I'm a 56-hour person, that's my quota, I have a deficit of 16 hours. My wife, about 42 hours per week is her magic number. So there's a big difference there. There's 14-hour difference of sleep. Figure out what your number is. And then do some basic math. Look at what you want to get each night and what you should be getting in the week. And if you're getting close to that number, you're probably going to be feeling good. If you're way out of whack, you're going to go, okay, yeah, I haven't really felt that good. And you know what? I'm in a 10 or 15 hour deficit each week, and that adds up. If you're in a 10-hour sleep deficit each week, that's 40 hours at the end of the month, right? 40 to 50 hours depending on the month. Let's get our sleep number, figure out your weekly sleep quota, then you have kind of a starting point of what your goal is or what you want to get and work towards. Now we're going to look at sleep hygiene. So sleep hygiene there's a lot of talk right now about hand hygiene, right? Keeping our hands clean, washing. If we're out at the grocery store, make sure we use hand sanitizer, wash our hands before we go into the grocery store, and so on. There's hand hygiene, which you hear that all the time in the news now, hand hygiene. There's also sleep hygiene. It's how are we being hygienic in regards to our sleep. Tip number one is limit your screen time before bed. We know this. I don't think this is new for anyone. Screens before bed tend to be not really a good thing to engage in right before bed. Particularly our PEDs, our portable electronic devices, they emit what's called a blue light, which can mess with the secretion of our melatonin, which is an essential chemical that's released that helps regulate our circadian rhythms. If you do struggle with sleep, this is one absolutely cut it out before bed until you can get your sleep dial back in. For some people, maybe it's not as big of a deal. If you struggle with sleep, I would say zero tolerance on screens at least 45 to 60 minutes before bed. Number 2 is creating a bedtime ritual. So last week we talked about some general tips, and one of them was maintaining a ritual as best as we can during this evolving situation. Bedtime rituals are super important when we're talking about sleep hygiene. Remember back when we were kids, or if we have children, bedtime rituals are quite consistent. They're routine. Brush your teeth, grab a bedtime snack, put on your jammies, go upstairs, read a book, lights out, go to bed. At least in my house, and I'm sure for most of us out there, there's been a pretty structured routine for kids. But something happens when we grow up. We seem to throw this routine out of the window. So my nighttime ritual is sometimes I will watch a little bit of news a little bit before I go to bed to kind of unwind. Then I read. Reading is my way of unwinding. I actually have a hard time now falling asleep if I'm not reading before I go to bed. That's something that I've just kind of conditioned myself. It really doesn't matter what your ritual is, as long as it's not amping you up. I know exercise can be a little bit tricky before going to bed, but yoga or meditation or mindfulness or some type of little routine that you can go through each night that maybe takes half an hour, 45 minutes, and what'll happen is give it a month or so, and your body and brain will start to naturally go, okay, it's time to go to bed, and it starts shutting down naturally. You fall into that deep REM sleep quicker, and you get that battery recharged faster, which is what we want. So we'll move on to tip number 3, which is make your bedroom a sacred space. So this is a short one, but this is super important. Bedrooms are meant for 2 things, and I'm talking about adults right now, sleep and romance. We're trying to basically hack our brain a little bit and trick it into, okay, now it's time to shut down. And when you get this system in place, and trust me, I've had bouts of insomnia, but I have a quite regimented sleep hygiene now. When you get it dialed in, it is great. Your body just naturally clicks in, you shut down. The computer shuts down, goes on charge for the night, you wake up better the next morning. So let's make our bedroom as best as we can, make it a sacred space. Don't have a whole lot of stuff going on. Tip number 4, which is sleep journaling or behavioral tracking. If you struggle with sleep, you have a hard time getting consistent restful sleep, just Google sleep journaling, sleep diaries, sleep behavioral tracking, and there's tons of forms that are super easy to use. You don't even, a lot of therapists will use them with their clients, but you can easily take yourself through them. If it's your son or daughter that struggles with sleep, these forms will really help you start to be a bit more objective and dial things in and look at what does my sleep hygiene look like, where are some areas of improvement. I'd like to just do a quick word on sleeping aids or sleeping pills, medication you get to sleep. So my first disclaimer is I'm not a medical doctor. So this advice is really coming from more psychological counseling therapist lens, not a medical doctor lens. So just to get that clear. So the thing is with sleeping pills, there are some risks, right? With taking any medication, obviously, my general rule is really try to go through the above tips that I talked about first. Exhaust all of those resources. Limit your screen time. Get your screens out of your bedroom. Make sure you have a really good bedtime ritual. And take some time. Take a month to really dial this in. Make your bedroom a sacred space. Don't have anything else in there besides sleep, romance. Try some sleep diaries, some behavioral tracking. If you go see a therapist, I would say exhaust all of those resources first and really do a good college try here before going to get a sleeping aid. You've tried everything else and it doesn't work, then talk to your family doctor and see what type of maybe pharmaceutical options that are out there, which obviously I can't be promoting. I just think that we should be trying the psychological stuff first and really giving it a good try. So with that, we're going to do a quick recap and some things to work on for the next week. Number one is figure out your sleep number. What do you need? And maybe it's going to take a week or two, right? We live in such a quick fix society. We want these numbers super fast. Maybe you're going to have to take a little bit of time to figure out what is your sleep number. Do you need 6 to 7 hours, and that's when you're rested and you're working optimally? Do you need 8 to 9 hours, like myself? And then times it by 7. What's your sleep quota? What do you really need per week? And when you draw this out, I would recommend, if you feel like you're not getting enough sleep, if you're someone who is minus 10 at the end of each week, just put that on a calendar or do the math. If you're minus 10 at the end of each week, you're going to be in the hundreds of hours of sleep that you should be getting that you're not at the end of the year, and that's scary. We need to try to get as much of that sleep back in our system. So figure out your sleep number, calculate your weekly sleep quota, limit your pre-sleep screen usage. That's important. Gaming, TV, tablets, phones, whatever it is. Create and maintain a bedtime ritual. So remember when you were a kid, if you have kids yourself, it's pretty routine. You brush your teeth, you grab a snack, you put your jammies on, you go upstairs. It's all done within 25 to 45 minutes. So we need to get those rituals back. Build them. It seems simple, but the simple things done extraordinarily well will get us profound results. So let's build in those routines and rituals. If it's having a bath before you go to bed, if it's listening to soft music, if it's reading, if it's doing some mindfulness, if it's doing yoga, if whatever, as long as it's helping you wind down, and try to do that on a consistent basis at the same time. That's important too, is going to bed at the same time within an hour or so each night. Number 4, make your bedroom a sacred space. So if you struggle with sleep and getting enough sleep and not feeling rested, look at your bedroom. 2 things, like I said, for adults: sleep and romance. Outside of that, get it out of the bedroom. Number 5 is sleep journaling or tracking. Just type it into Google. Lots of free stuff out there that you can dial in. I'd say give it a good 2 to 4 weeks of really analyzing your own data. And then I just talked about a word on sleeping aids. Obviously, not a medical doctor. Consult medical professionals for that, but my suggestion is really exhaust all the psychological tips that I went through first, because sometimes they are enough. If they're done and you commit to really dialing in your sleep hygiene, most people, that's enough, right? So that's it for week number 3 of our Mental Health Mondays. And next week's topic is going to be on goals. Thanks a lot. Tune in next week for our next week's topic. Have a good week.